Hey everyone, Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14, back here to discuss more SEC basketball roster movements and one big one in particular as we go to Lexington, where Oscar Tshiebwe has officially declared for the NBA draft. Not a surprise there at all. I think we all sort of expected this to happen. Just the nature of how the NBA draft process works. But the big part, of course, was to look at actually what Oscar Tshiebwe said, and that was that he was going to maintain his college eligibility. We talked about other guys who declared for the draft and made it very clear that they were shutting the door on their college career. That is not the case for Oscar Tshiebwe, who, again, made it very clear that he was going to, leave open the option of withdrawing from the NBA draft, which I think that's going to be May 31st, and having the opportunity to return to college for another season. Now, this opens up a lot of questions because if you're a Kentucky fan, I've already seen a lot of opinions on this one about whether Kentucky fans think he should stay, he should go. Well, let's talk about the first part because I think when you look at the actual draft projections, if you've been following this, you know that Oscar Tshiebwe is not projected as a first round pick. He is probably, again, at best going to be my guess is mid to late round second round pick. And I think it's probably more so on the later part of that equation. He's not, he's not a surefire second round pick. And I think that's what makes this whole conversation very interesting because even as a guy who we've seen just dominate the college side of things, he's not someone that has necessarily been in a position where people think he's just going to go dominate the NBA. His skill set has done very well in college, but we've talked about this for a couple of years now. He's going to have to continue to develop his game overall, to be someone that will succeed long term at the NBA level. But can he get there? Sure. But right now, again, the projections don't have him as one of those, top tier picks, especially when you look at it. He's not a first round pick. You are talking about a guy that if he is drafted, it will be in the second round. And that becomes the bigger part of the question now, because, as Kyle Tucker noted in his article for The Athletic, you are talking about someone who made seven figures in NIL deals this past season, Oscar Tshiebwe. That's not, a small amount of change. So if you're looking at it, the possibility of being a second round pick, or if it's a two-way contract, with the NBA level, those are things you have to consider because this is not a guy. We talked about the NIL opportunities and stuff with other players. This is much different because you're talking about a guy who's not just going out trying to find those opportunities. Those opportunities are coming to him. He has no shortage of options as a former National Player of the Year, to make a lot of money at the college level. It's going to be, again, that's going to be part of the equation here, because that could drive a big portion of what happens. Because that's the good thing for Oscar Tshiebwe is, you know, is it just a matter of, pursuing that professional opportunity? And if so, yes, he'll get paid. Like he'll get a contract somewhere, somehow, some way, because there will be a team, I think, that looks at sort of his skills and knows that they can probably develop some of those areas that maybe he struggled in a little bit. And I know Kentucky fans have brought up the defensive stuff and all those things, and I think they're fair points when you look at it just at the college level. But overall, that's not going to be a big problem for Oscar Tshiebwe in figuring out where he can, make the most money in a sense, because we've already seen the numbers that he can make in Lexington at Kentucky, and just knowing how astronomical that number is for an NIL deal in college. And so that's something that will certainly be in consideration here. And remember, we're talking about a guy, yes, maintaining his college eligibility, but he is going to be 24 when next season starts. I think he turns 24 in November. So, but that's the nature of where we are now. And, you're just talking about just with all the elements that have been in play the past several years, he still has the option to be playing even at 24 in college and still making a lot of money. So that's one option that's certainly on the table. Now, if you look at it just from the return to Kentucky aspect for Oscar Tshiebwe, how does he fit into next year's roster? And I've seen a lot of people debate this on, what would his role look like offensively and defensively next season on this Kentucky team, which we've talked about this a lot, throughout the season. We've said we started to look ahead the next season and said, hey, this is a recruiting class that even by Kentucky standards seems to be one that's pretty special. I mean, this, that's a high bar, but like this is a class, as we've said, talking about all the guys they're going to have coming in. Um, there are high expectations, and we know the pressure is on because we've talked about that. Kentucky has not achieved the success they want to achieve in the NCAA tournament for a while now. And, I've kind of called this Cal's last stand. Like, I feel like that's where we are heading into next season, in that if he can't sort of make that next push to get Kentucky back to where they want to be on a national stage in the NCAA tournament, if you can't do it with this roster, that's the question now. And so I think the expectations, the pressure are very high heading into next season. And so you can look at how would Oscar Tshiebwe fit into the mix, and the first person that people will go to is Aaron Bradshaw coming in as a, 7-foot center who's going to come in, and people can say, well, how will that impact Oscar Tshiebwe's decision? I don't know that that's a huge thing necessarily for Oscar Tshiebwe. Now, for Kentucky, it may be trying to figure that out, and for John Calipari, that may be part of the question. But for Oscar Tshiebwe, I don't know that he would necessarily just look at that and say, man, and nothing against anyone, Aaron Bradshaw or anyone else, but it's like we are talking about a former national player of the year, a guy who comes out and can consistently at times put up 20 points and 20 rebounds. I don't think he's necessarily worried about playing time. And so it then just becomes, how does Cal evolve in terms of how they use him? Because I think that's always been kind of something we talked about it before, right? In terms of maybe just trying to push everything through Oscar Tshiebwe rather than, allowing things to be a little bit more open, and knowing he's still going to get his opportunities and you can still run things through him. But is he going to be the guy you run everything through? That again, that opens up a lot of questions about how he would fit with next year's roster, not just because of his skill set. It's basically how would the coaching staff use him based on the possibility of what next year's roster could look like. And we've talked about the Hunter Dickinson aspect. The Michigan transfer met with Kentucky via Zoom earlier this week. I mean, look, if you have Hunter Dickinson and Aaron Bradshaw there, I can't imagine there's a possibility where all three of those guys are on the same roster together. But if so, you want to talk about fascinating how Cal would figure that out. I have no idea, but yes, I don't think that's going to happen. But that, I think, is just where you look at it from Tshiebwe and his standpoint too. It's what would his role be offensively? What would his role be defensively? And I think those are all questions that are going to be weighed here. The one, I guess, scenario I've not mentioned, of course, is maintaining college eligibility does not necessarily mean returning to Kentucky. Is that a possibility? I don't know. Like I always say, it's impossible to know, especially, and you've heard me talk about this with other guys. I say it's impossible to know in some of these scenarios because you don't know what opportunities are out there. The thing with this one is you do know what opportunities are out there for Oscar Tshiebwe. There's a lot of people, around the country that would have probably, money lined up to pay Oscar Tshiebwe in an NIL deal. Now, can they do it to the level that Kentucky can do it? Not everyone can do that. There may be other places that can. So I don't know if that's necessarily the direction this is headed in, but everything's on the table for a guy like this. And this is such a unique situation because we are talking about a consensus national player of the year who is not really projected to be, a surefire NBA draft pick. And that's just sort of a unique case. And so it is, and especially think about this, it would have been a unique case a decade ago, but it is especially now because of the NIL aspect and because of the transfer rules, all those things. So it just makes this a lot more, not complicated in a negative sense, but it is pretty complicated to try to figure out exactly what the move is going to be here because there are a lot of options on the table. So I'm really curious to see what happens here. I think for Kentucky, we've already said they're going to be very good next season. With or without Oscar Tshiebwe, they're going to be considered, a top tier national championship contender. But how many years have we really not said that about Kentucky? But it's just, can they actually get to that level that Cal probably needs them to get back to? And I know Kentucky fans are hoping that they can get back to, because that's where they need to be as a program. And they just have not had that success in terms of Final Fours, national championships that I think Kentucky fans expect. And, will that happen with Oscar Tshiebwe there? Will it not? Will it happen without Oscar Tshiebwe there? We don't know because this has kind of opened up a very interesting scenario here as we head, forward and looking at it here. Just given, I think you always have to keep that in mind. Just because he's not projected to be an NBA draft pick as of right now, he could still be drafted. And I think you just have to remember how dominant he has been at times in the college game. Even though, sure, there are things that he has to work on to continue to grow his game. There's no question about that. But yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this plays out and what that means for Kentucky heading into next season. But Kentucky fans, I know we have a lot of you that watch the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think is going to happen? What do you want to happen with this situation with Oscar Tshiebwe? I've heard the criticism all year from some people. I've heard other people kind of, pushing back and saying, hey, everyone has their flaws. And we're still talking about a guy who's been dominant at this college level. I think you look at it on both sides. There's been arguments there. So let me know what you think. What do you expect to happen in this case here with Oscar Tshiebwe? And do you think he returns to Lexington? Do you think he goes to the NBA? Do you think he transfers? All options that are on the table at this point. So, yes, let us know what you think in the comments below. And we appreciate your support as always of Southeastern 14. A lot more videos on the way looking at SEC basketball roster movement this offseason. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. It helps us out. And again, if you want SEC basketball, baseball, football, we've got it all here at Southeastern 14. So check everything out on the channel. And again, we appreciate you guys as always for watching. And we'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.